Is there people here from K&N? Is there people here? Come to the front. Is there people here from Stradlin? Do you need to come to the front? Are there people from Piper or De La Rosa? Are there people here? Is there anybody here from GCR? All right, they're not here. Please make a note they need to be here next time. Dr. Harter, could you ask Disclosure Council? They need to be present. Go ahead, Dr. Harter. I'll let you.
Well, back when in 2009, the board arrived at a really hard decision around closing of schools, and then brought back a bond measure in 2010 that didn't involve any of those schools that were to be closed. And so one of the things about this program, I'm so glad that Mr. Ramsey mentioned it earlier tonight, is the commitment to equity. And what we have is we have some schools that, as a result of initially being on the closure list, that are no longer on the list, as well as some schools that were left out in the bond measure of Measure D of 2010. Unless we take action to get our community behind a bond measure tonight, then they'll be in inequitable facilities. And anybody who's walked through Lake or Shannon knows exactly what I'm talking about in terms of, or Grant, in terms of the conditions of those schools.
Terrible.
And so what I'm here tonight is to recommend to the board that they approve Resolution 17-1213, and I do have some modifications to read into the record, and they're before you tonight. And what I'd like to do is to bring the board's attention to this is the first one is on page A1. It's Exhibit A, where we have made the first change in his, and the change is boldface there. It's in the actual 75 words where we added the word science labs. It's one of the important things that we want in terms of our upgrades, and we want to make sure that that's out in front of the public eye. And then if you look at the next page right there where it is boldface, we've added science labs, upgrade science labs again under Exhibit B. And so those are the two changes that are there. There's one other change that's in the technical language. It's back on B3. If you look at the bottom paragraph on page B3, in the second sentence, which begins, in addition to the listed repair and construction projects, if you look about two-thirds of the way down there, it's bold-faced, as well as the refinancing of outstanding general obligation bond debt of the district. So that's the additional technical language that needed to be in there compared to the resolution that you have before you. Otherwise, we're ready for the board to go ahead and approve that resolution, and that's our recommendation tonight.
All right, do you have any public comment?
There are two people for public comment.
Okay.
Eduardo Martinez and Ilona Clark. You'll come up to the microphone, and we'll start with Mr. Martinez.
Hold on a second, sorry. Make sure he gets his full 2 minutes so he can have that thing turned on.
Okay,
sorry about that, Mr. Martinez.
I just turned it on? Yeah,
is it okay?
Turned it on.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you. All right, we do need a bond to achieve equity for all the students in our district. My complaint is that we also need a parcel tax with an increase. We need the parcel tax with an increase more than we need the bond at this moment. The bond should have been floated in 2014, not now. I remember in 2004, the bond money had been transferred from Downer Elementary to El Cerrito, and it took the Downer community marching to the school board to convince the school board that Downer Elementary needed the changes then. Well, likewise, we need quality education for our students in whatever kind of buildings they're in now. Whether or not the and the reason that we need to do the parcel tax now is because it requires a higher percentage to pass, and now is the time to pass it. We have the presidential election. We have parents who are ready to move to make the parcel tax pass, but with the bond in the way And with no increase, the impetus for passing the parcel tax has dissipated. So once again, bond in 2014, parcel tax with an increase now is the best policy, and I wish that you would follow the lead of your community. Thank you.
Next speaker.
I actually have a couple of questions and then a quick comment. Do the questions count as part of my 2 minutes?
Yes.
How much total interest would the district pay for this bond measure? Total.
We can get a, Mikiko, can you come up and answer that question?
I think a lot of it will depend on the interest rate market in the future, and the timing of the bond issuances over time. I think we're trying to implement this over a 10-year period, so there could be a lot of fluctuation in interest rates over time. I think we are doing our best to make sure that we're able to issue these bonds as current interest bonds, which tend to have a lower interest rate, and also pay them off over 25 years. Can you speak into the mic so we can hear you guys? Sure. I'm sorry about that.
Hey, I'm running the meeting. It's inappropriate. Go ahead.
So I was mentioning that we're going to be implementing, the current plan is to implement this program over a 10-year period, so there will be, we will be subject to the interest market in the future, but the district is planning to issue the bonds as current interest bonds, which tend to have lower borrowing rates, and also repay the bonds over 25 years rather than 40 years, which will also decrease the interest cost on these bonds over time.
Okay, so these bonds are variable rate interest, and right now we have low interest, and presumably they'll go up in the future, but that's just presumably. So I'm assuming that this is a bond and not a tax because we don't need a 2/3 majority to pass a tax, and that's hard to get. However, the last tax, well, not the last one, but at the beginning of the recession, a parcel tax did pass, and it passed by a very good margin for the schools of this district. The last tax, from my point of view, was misrepresented as being for schools, but the voter guide was clear that it was also for police and firemen and libraries, and these are all great, admirable, necessary services, but call a spade and let your constituents make the decision, and you might have better luck passing a tax for schools. Finally, schools are about people, and we're cutting teacher benefits, and we're losing talent. I could go on and on. Class size reduction is constantly on the edge, so put your taxpayers' money into your people, not into buildings and not into interest. Thanks.
Yeah, I had a couple questions for Mikiko on mine. So it dovetails with Ms. Clark. Could you please come to the mic? You're representing K&N tonight. If you look at page 3 on the resolution board, because, obviously, it says in section 8, the maturity of the board, this just gives the flexibility because I agree it's 25 years. We've done 30. Mm-hmm. I'm not doing 40. I know Pittsburgh tonight is debating whether to do 40-year caps, capital appreciation bonds that have skyrocket rates, but I just want this to be, I don't mind keeping it in there, but board members have to understand that we're having this as a safety net in case something happens later down the road. Because this board made it clear we haven't gone out ever and done 40-year anything. But go ahead.
That's correct. Yeah, this language is in here, and I don't want to talk over
I'm tired of this boilerplate language. Come on. Obviously, Stradlin wrote this thing. This is just boilerplate language.
It's built in there as flexibility in case the district...
Well, let him speak. He wrote it. So go ahead. What's going on here?
Good evening, President Ramsey and members of the board. This section provides the maximum flexibility. That doesn't mean that it has to go out past 25 years. That's a decision for the board to make. It just provides the ultimate flexibility.
What I want to understand, because we're governed by the Ed Code, not the government code. Is there resolutions that have to be passed to exceed that 25-year and waive that? Because this is common, typical, that districts go with these 40-year bonds or 30 or 35-year bonds. What's the regulation on that? Because I've never seen a resolution when we go beyond the 25 years.
There's two independent authorities to issue bonds as a school district. One is the Education Code, as you mentioned, which has a maximum term of 25 years. The other independent authority is the Government Code. And while school districts are able to issue bonds under the Government Code, that's also for other governmental agencies as well. So there's a different set of rules that govern, that section. But in terms of the practical impact for the district, the resolutions that are adopted under the Government Code and the Education Code are, for all intents and purposes, the same, except for the extending of the maturity.
All right, I have another question that I wanted to ask. Is, with respect to Exhibit B, is there a reason why we don't list the remaining schools on this? You prepared this document. Why is Grant Lake? Is it just, where do I tell my voters? Or is that just part of the campaign?
If I could, Mr. Ramsey?
Yeah, go ahead.
We have not listed a specific project list because what we're asking the voters to approve are the types of projects that we might apply across the board at our schools, rather than narrowing it down to only being able to spend those funds at a particular set of schools. And this flexibility has been proved to serve the district very well.
I agree. I just want to make sure that
flexibility.
We're not missing out, and so we make sure we have that.
Because people have asked that question.
Right. But he answered it, so it's going to be make sure it's inclusive of that. And then the other part is on B3, Ms. Sato, and what's your name again?
Nick Heuer.
And what's your last name?
Heuer, H-E-U-E-R.
And how long you been with Stradlin?
For 4 years.
So it says, as well as the refinancing of general obligation bond debt of the district. What does that mean? You wrote it.
This is referring to the use of bond proceeds to refund previously issued
Okay,
general
so this is
obligation
the
bonds.
tax stabilization piece? Okay.
Correct.
Mr. Olson, you just showed up. You want to come to the mic and give an explanation so the viewing on. And GCR is here now? Okay, thank you. Go ahead. What does this language mean? What's the purpose of it?
The purpose of the tax rate stabilization fund, or the ability to use new bond proceeds to prepay existing debt or pay down existing debt, is to make sure that old programs that were built in a time of a better economy and push payments to the back are able to stay within their tax rate targets over the long term. So this allows you to spend money on a new bond money to pay down the tax rate so it keeps your commitments to voters from when they voted on past elections. This is a district that has a relationship with its voters where they've been very supportive of you, and this would be a way to make sure you keep your commitments to them.
Okay, obviously we need where is it in here for because I want to make sure we're transparent in asking for the debt limit waiver. Where is that in here? Where is that in this document?
It's on the bottom of page B4.
Read it.
The district may seek a waiver from the State Board of Education of the applicable bonding limit requirements of Section 15106 of the Education Code.
All right, good. Because I just want to make sure it's clear it got approved. We're one of the few districts that actually asked the voter, which I think is a strong testament to our transparency and our willingness to be able to move forward. You guys are what are you guys saying to each other?
I was asking whether that language was also referred to in the 75 word.
There is a reference to it in Exhibit A, That's the detail that expounds upon what's in Exhibit A. It says within legal rates and bonding capacity limits.
Yeah, I saw that. That was because I read our one from 2010. It's there. It's the same. You guys just changed the dollar amount and added science labs. So it's fine with me because that's what was done in 2010. The other question I had, it's not page, it says tax rate statement for bond measure blank. It had to deal with, this is where we're saying, I don't understand on number 2, the best estimate of the tax rate which would be required to be levied to fund this bond during the first fiscal year after the sale of the last series of bonds. And how many series of bonds are we talking about? Why is that not outlined here? What are we expecting or anticipating?
The expectation is that this bond program would be implemented over a 10-year period. So there would be bond issues in 2013, 15, 17, 19, and 21. Again, the idea is that we're asking 5 different series of bonds sold in alternate years. And the idea is that this bond election is about bringing in enough revenues so that you can continue to move along a long-term program. This is not going to bring in $200 or $360 million into the facilities tomorrow. This district is a district that's on a long-term capital program. This bond election will allow you to continue to move forward at a faster pace than we had been downsizing to move through.
Yeah, I'd like to ask my bankers their thoughts on that from Piper and EJ in terms of the structure of this and what they typically see moving forward. Do you think this is something that then creates sustainability and viability?
It does, absolutely. And again, thank you for having us here, Jeff Barrato with Piper Jaffray. The structure of the alternating years combined with the current program that you have will give you the most amount of flexibility. It's something that a lot of districts don't have, but the structure that you're looking at today is what most districts do. You're not going to spend all $360 million in the first couple of years, and you'll spread it out. They'll give you an opportunity then to move your projects through the program, keeping the tax rates as low as possible.
Right, that's what I wanted, Ms. Clark. It's keeping the tax rate low because we have the flexibility with 3 different bond measures, so we don't have to have this escalating debt service by issuing now all of it, but slowly over a period of time to keep the tax rates and the tax costs down while maximizing the benefit. Mr. Henry, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure, I would echo what Jeff said, and in conjunction, again, Scott Henry with De La Rosa, by spreading it out over a 10-year period rather than issuing it all up front, what it will allow you to do is keep to that 25-year maximum final maturity for each series, as well as the utilization of current interest bonds. So it will really lower the interest payments that you make, which is obviously one of the key components to spreading it out and this bond program.
Yeah, and for you, Dave, what are your thoughts, Mr. Olson?
I think the initial question got at sustainability of the program. What we want to make sure we're able to do is to address all the school sites over time. We have learned, certainly in these last number of years, that economic conditions can change, and that can move the bond program in different ways. But we want to have enough resources that we can continue walking down the path. The question started at sustainability, and I think this program is sustainable as long as we keep to the kind of moderate pace. We don't, if this measure passes, we don't need to be as slow as we were planning on after just the 2010 Measure D, but we won't be as fast as the program was moving in the mid-2000s, but that's going to make it sustainable. I think the program's built now for $80 to $100 million worth of expenditures per year, which is a pretty good pace, but not as fast as you were at the fastest.
No, that's great, because I think what we want to convince the community about, and I also want to acknowledge, Krishna, you want to come up, and Ms. Petit from GCR, and thank her for coming as well. I didn't have any questions, but I just want to say thank you for being here as Disclosure Counsel.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody.
Is that that's the importance for why I support this, because it will guarantee that we'll get through all our schools. We'll be able to keep the SGIs on. We'll be able to keep our architects on. We'll not be able to slow the program down. And I can tell you, this will be the most unique program in the state of California because it will have the flexibility with Measure J, Measure D, and whatever this measure is labeled, so that it will ensure that even long after we're gone, the program won't slow down and really will come to completion. So I'm excited about that. So I'm done with any questions. I don't know if anybody else had any other questions. Miss Merriweather.
I just had one question. Will it affect our bond rating?
It's a good question.
That's a very good question. This district has, as you remember, for the number of students that are educated, has a relatively small tax base.
Right.
So that's why the tax rate has been relatively high. It also has very old facilities that you've been addressing over time when not touching the schools between 1970 and 2000 or doing very little, put the district in a difficult situation. So you are becoming a relatively high debt district, and it's starting to catch the attention of some of the rating agencies. So this bond may have put negative pressure on the district's ratings, but your commitment is not only to the rating agencies, but to the district students as well. Obviously.
Yeah, and I think it's also what you wasn't pointing out. Also, we were shut out because of the bankruptcy, even getting any funds for 7 years between 1991 and 1998. We were shut out. So I like the fact that we're being able to be proactive and get all the eligibility money that we're entitled to. We're getting a lot of money that other districts wouldn't have. So our district's gotten over $150 million of free money. So I want to thank all of you. It's time for the board. Is there Mr. Thurman?
I wanted to kind of enhance the question from the speaker. She'd asked about interest rates, and I know that we can't project what interest rates might be in the future, but are these projections based on the current interest rates that or averages that we're seeing for these bond measures?
Jeff could speak with more authority.
Yeah, we'll let him speak
Scott,
then.
to what rates will be in the future. But as for the financing plan, we're based around interest rates of about 5.75%, which is significantly higher than current interest rates. But I'd argue that current interest rates are relatively low by historic standards, so we wanted to build in a little cushion there.
Relatively low? I mean,
we've been aggressive as a district in refinancing to take advantage of lower interest rates. So I wanted to really illustrate the rest of the speaker's question because I thought it was a good question. Thank you, ma'am. And because she's asking us to steward the public's dollars well, and I didn't want anyone to leave not hearing that we've been fortunate and successful and aggressive in making sure we get the best interest rates that we can for the citizens. I think the other part is that we should just say it for those who are watching at home, for those who might read about this in the newspaper. While it's not written in the language of the measure that the board is voting on tonight, it is our intent to make sure that we rebuild schools like Grant and Olinda and Shannon and Collins and, of course, Kennedy. I think it's important for people to hear that over and over again, that that is our intent, so that they understand we are completing the program and making the best use of their hard-earned dollars, and we're thankful for their generosity.
Yeah, Mr. Barada, you wanted to expand because he should have let you answer the question.
And it's completely fine. I think the use of the interest rate of 5.75% is certainly a very conservative way to go. It's not the rates that we're seeing today, but we certainly don't know what rates are going to be in the next 7, 8, 10 years. And so to use a number like that is absolutely the best way to go about it, to make the structure as solid as you can and to expect certain blips as you go along.
I'm struggling with that, but I agree with you because that's just that to me it's super conservative. If we look at all in what we were at 3.24 on the last one over 20 years, and that didn't even include the then the new money GO last year, we were 3.72 all in for a single A rated district. Now, I agree, we're probably not going to go be a single A because of our tax burdens and the fact that they just don't care about poor people. That's just the reality. But one day you got to, like they all said that, you know, Rockefeller and Hilton, they started out with no money at one point, so we're moving our way up. But it is somewhat conservative, and I would really struggle selling any bonds at those kind of interest rates for the next 5 to 10 years. I would really struggle with that. The days of getting ripped off by Warren Buffett definitely are over with. I mean, the 09 deals and all that other stuff, that's really behind us. I mean, I would really struggle with selling municipal bonds at those kind of rates.
Certainly today, and I understand that. What I think is really important to understand is that although the structure that Dave and Makiko are putting together are projections that move out, what happens on a quite a regular basis every few months are a look at where the AVs are, where the interest rates are, and every time you issue, everything gets readjusted. And so all of those calculations are looked at on a continual basis, readjusted, and come back to you with a report specifically at the subcommittee and from time to time at the full board as well. And so it's a great place to start. It's a belt and suspenders approach. It's the wisest thing to do to start that way and then start adjusting it as you get real numbers as you get closer to the issuance.
Well, I think that's important, but for me, that's not. It's more about the spread to the MMDs. What are we comparing with like districts? What are we doing relative to what they're doing? Are we staying below that 125? I mean, I saw Pittsburgh, what was it, 50, 60 spreads to them. That's a lot better. I want to keep improving there instead of being where we were in the 150s and 160s. And so for me, that's what I'm going to be looking at. But Ms. Cronenberg, you wanted to make a motion?
I move approval of the resolution.
Second.
Okay, I want to thank all you guys. Can have a seat. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Cronenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Medrano?
Yes.
Ms. Merriweather?
Yes.
Mr. Thurman?
Yes.
President Ramsey?
Aye. I'm excited. Thank you very much. We have a $360 million bond measure on the ballot for November. Good work, everybody. Congratulations. All right.